The topic that we're going to talk about, what I'm going to do is give you just a little bit of a preview of a talk that I'll be presenting at Mainstream. I want everybody to understand I am not a psychologist. I am not an industrial psychologist. Most of the stuff that you're going to hear in the presentation is come through the School of Hard Knocks. You know, if there's a mistake that could be made, I probably made it. But I've tried to learn during the course of my career and incorporate those things as I go. So I call this talk Maintenance Psychology 101. As Tom said, there's basically 8 questions we're going to dive into in this presentation, and we're going to talk about what motivates technical people. You know, what do craft people value versus what a maintenance manager should value. How to identify and engage the natural leaders of an organization. When I say natural leader, I'm not talking about positional leadership. I'm talking about the people that organization looks up to and follows. How do I handle the naysayers and the negative influence within an organization? Unfortunately, most organizations have that to deal with. So how do we handle those people? And who as a manager should be my target audience? Who should I be spending time with within that team? What traits do I look for when adding someone to the organization? How do I select the right kind of people for different roles with the organization? And that is key. We have a lot of great people, a lot of great talent, but not everybody's perfect for every role. So we'll talk about that. And finally, this thing that I keep seeing that I think is quite destructive is this electricians versus mechanics mentality that can embed itself in an organization and cause it a lot of dysfunctionality. So those are just some of the questions we're going to try to answer. Again, this presentation is just a preview. I'm not going through the entire presentation, but to give you a sense of what we'll talk about. One of the things that I've noted is we tend to talk about culture change as if it's a discrete entity, as if it's kind of a standalone variable. And that's not the case at all. It's really a very complex equation. There's pieces of it that come in with the individuals, and there's pieces of it from an organizational standpoint, and those things come together to create what we call organizational culture. I think of a lot of it like OEE. You know, if you look at OEE as a single number, it doesn't tell you a lot about where the problems are or where you need to improve. So again, it is a multi-variable equation when we talk about organizational culture. It's quite complex. There's 4 critical characteristics that I look at when we're talking about individuals within an organization. That's attitude, aptitude, skill set, and leadership. And in the talk, we'll be talking about which of these are the most critical. Which of these do the teams value the most, and how are these interrelated, and how do they work together to create, an effective or not so effective individual, or also from a team standpoint. I'll talk to each of those in the presentation later, but I'm keen on attitude here, which I personally believe to be the most important attribute. Attitudes come from experience. They are a learned tendency and a way to evaluate certain things in a certain way. It includes evaluation of people's issues, objects, or events. And sometimes, those evaluations are positive, negative, and at times they can be uncertain at times. And if you think about your organizations, you probably see people that fall within each of those categories. And even though people's attitudes can be influenced by organizational norms, once a person, is matured and has entered into the workforce, they come in what I call attitudinal tendencies. And those are generally either positive or negative. And it's kind of the half full, half empty scenario, if you would. And understanding, people when you're bringing them to the organization, how they view the workplace and view, their approach to others as well as the work that we asked to do is a key component. We talk about just 3 of those: skills, attitude, and leadership, there really is a spectrum in terms of the direction of influence. That's the y-axis, either positive or negative, and the magnitude of influence that those people have on an organization. And the size of the letters here tend to show the strengths within those different areas. People that fall within kind of the neutral attitude standpoint have the least impact on an organization. People with better skills tend to have a little bit more influence, but again, this is the silent majority, if you would, and really don't set the theme and the direction for the organization nearly as much as people with, strong attitudes, either in a positive or a negative direction. And the people down in the bottom right-hand corner with good skills, negative attitudes, and strong leadership skills are the ones that can really take an organization in a direction you don't want to go. And on the other hand, the people in the top right-hand corner are the people that you really want to empower and to put into a place of leadership within the organization if you want it to move in the right direction for you. If you think about it as a bell curve, people kind of, the organization falls into different areas. Fortunately, there's not a lot of these people on the left-hand side, and there's not so many people with strong skills, strong attitude, and strong leadership as well. Most everybody falls somewhere in between. So it really is a bell curve, and understanding where people within your organization fall within that bell curve is a key step towards understanding as well how the organization needs to move and who you should be engaging to make that happen. So the first thing you need to do is understand the makeup of your team. And in the presentation, I will be presenting kind of a simple way that I use, kind of behind closed doors discussions I have with maintenance managers and leaders in our facilities about how do you envision and visualize the makeup and the demographics of your organization. And that really dictates the strategy for creating an effective team. And so we will be talking about a lot of different options and approaches for doing that within the presentation in June. I think the good news, and when we start talking about creating positive momentum, most people want to do the right thing, and they recognize it when they see it. There's very few people that I refer to as devoutly hostile. There are some, and we all have seen them in our careers, but there's not that many of them. Most of the people who fall in the center of that bell curve are really looking to see what leadership's going to do. They may be discouraged by negative attitudes. They may have been squelched. These are not the most verbal people in the organization, and they're really looking to leadership to see, what direction they're going. And what you'll find is people that you may characterize as having negative attitudes are really wanting to do the right things, but they're disenfranchised by some of the negativity and lack of leadership. So, the whole key to this thing is the leadership piece and what we're willing to do and the standards and the expectations we're willing to set. So having said that, it's the old lead by example mentality. You've got to look inwardly first, and the first thing you've got to do is make sure that you display the behaviors that you're expecting from others. Another key point is always remain respectful and professional, regardless of how you feel. I've personally been in a lot of situations where it'd be very easy to lose my cool, and quite frankly, there's been times when I have, and I've always regretted it. But you're setting the example. So take the high road. If you do, when you lose your cool, you lose credibility with the organization. And the other thing that is a pitfall, I think, is to avoid favoritism. The rules apply to everyone. We all have personal favorites and least favorites within our organization. But if someone who we have a high regard for steps across one of those boundaries, we have to be willing to pull those people back as well. And finally, acknowledge your own mistakes. And we all make those, and learn from them as you go. A little bit about what motivates technical people, and you guys have got a lot of experience, and you could probably add to the list. But what I've found, and most skilled craftspeople are very proud of their craft. They've chosen it because they have a passion for it, and they generally take pride in doing a good job. They're motivated by recognition of their skills and appreciation of a job well done. They like the opportunity to learn new skills, and they like challenges as long as they have the right support to be successful. Also, most people like a peaceful coexistence. They don't come to work looking for a fight or looking for a miserable time. They like a peaceful existence with coworkers and management, and they're usually frustrated when that doesn't happen. And again, many people who feel disenfranchised are discouraged by those negative attitudes. And when an organization starts to move, they will quickly come on board. I'll give you an anecdote from my past. I inherited a team one time that was known in the organization as kind of the team from hell. They were kind of very much in the storming phase when I inherited them. And there were 3 to 4 individuals in that team that were very outspoken, very strong influences on the team, but were not moving things in the direction that I thought they should be. And over time, what I started doing, I'm back to the attitude thing. I made the decision that I was going to hire people based on attitude. And I started seeding the organization with individuals who had the aptitude to do the work, but also a strong attitude. And it was amazing to see the transformation that took place in that team. 3 of the 4 individuals that I referred to, a couple of them made their own choice to leave. One of them we helped him, and another person kind of saw the writing on the wall and actually became a strong advocate over time. And I will say that there were about 4 people that I hired during that phase of the transformation for that team, and all 4 of those people are in leadership positions in the organization today. So they proved themselves not only valuable for that part of what we were trying to accomplish, but that, again, with the aptitude and the attitude, they've advanced in the organization. So it's a real success story, I think. One of the things that we've got to do, and unfortunately sometimes it's hard to do, is really set clear behavioral behavioral expectations. You can't change attitudes always because, again, if you think back, I said people come in with attitudinal tendencies, but you can change behaviors. And we must insist on mutually respectful behavior. And one of the big things in the trap that I fell into for quite a while in my career was, I wanted to convert the naysayers. And I spent a lot of my energy on that arena. And, quite frankly, that's a reward to some people. And you particularly don't want to get into those, into arguments or into those discussions, in front of the team. So, I usually I learned to take those discussions offline. And that kind of thing just really charges their batteries, and it will drain yours very quickly, as well as the rest of the team. There are some studies that have been done on this, and I won't go into all this detail, but one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that I think it was something like 87% of the people that were designated as bad hires were designated so because of 89%. Here's the number. for attitudinal reasons. And if you think back over your careers and your experience as leaders in this arena, you probably can relate to that. So again, there's even scientific studies and work that says that hiring for attitude really is the best approach. When we start this, kind of some of the things to expect. Old habits die hard, and the people in the middle are going to take a wait-and-see attitude, to see if things really are going to change or are going to move in a different direction. And quite frankly, a lot of the cases, the people that have owned the team, so to speak, will get louder. And if that happens, that really is an indication that you're moving in the right direction, but you got to be prepared to deal with it. And I've said better yet, the idea is to get the organization to a point that it deals with it through positive peer pressure. Back to the individuals I was speaking about, the one person that refused to leave, and he finally stepped so far out of line. The team met, and I walked in the door during this meeting, and the person leading that meeting looked up at me and says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I thought I might have some input." He said, "We don't need you." And the team made the decision that person needed to leave, which was an indication to me that things were really moving in the right direction. So, positive peer pressure, we tend to think of peer pressure in a negative direction, but it can have a very positive influence too. Another topic that I'll touch on is right people in the right roles. And one of there's one example. A lot of organizations, I think, make the mistake of selecting the very best technical person for the planner position. As a matter of fact, a recent anecdote on that, I was at one of our facilities here recently, and they were they were saying, I was asking them about, the level of planning that they're doing, and the big constraint they had was the guy in the planner role was the best mechanic they had, and they couldn't leave him alone. Another one is I was in one of our facilities, and a guy that was in the planner role. This is a guy that will do a good job regardless of where you put him. Extremely conscientious, and was doing a good job in the planner role. But I knew him quite well personally, and I asked him, "What do you want to do?" And he said he wanted to work with his hands. We realigned that organization. Put somebody else in the planner role, put that person into a reliability technician's position, and the transformation in terms of downtime reduction in that plant through the efforts that he's made and along with some others has been astounding. They have a 35% reduction over downtime from this time last year, and I attribute a lot of that by having him in the right position, out making the changes and doing the work that he loves to do, and as well as what he needs to do. So we'll talk a lot about that in this presentation as well. There's a lot of different personality types, 4 in specific that we'll go into details with. The hero, that's the guy that loves nothing better than a good breakdown. The analyst, the guy that if you want it done right, he's your guy. If you want it done quickly, he's probably not the guy to get it done for you. The generalist, kind of a jack of all trades. And the detailer is a guy that just loves a good spreadsheet. Those are the type of guys that you really want in a planner role in some of those attention to detail type of positions. So we'll do a deep dive into each of these different personality types, and we'll talk about what roles they're best suited for. And this electricians versus mechanics thing, I threw this in because I've seen some pretty destructive trends in organizations when this is allowed to get out of hand. And quite frankly, there's a lot of things that management does, either consciously or unconsciously, that fosters that. Another example that I've seen, I was at a plant one time, and there was a morning maintenance meeting. It was a relatively large room, And on one side of the room were the electricians having a meeting with the electrical leader. On the other side of the room were the mechanics having a meeting with the mechanical leader. You know, same room, same time, two different meetings going on, and it was terrible. Some of the things that they're allowing in that plant that really fostered that mentality. So one of the first recommendations I made is we're getting rid of the individual tables. We're going to have one table and it's going to be one meeting. And we made a lot of other changes in that organization as well to try to bring that under control. So kind of in the takeaways from this presentation will be understand the demographics of your organization, stating expectations and being consistent about those, how to identify the natural leaders on the team, and how to put positive energy into positive people and stop putting negative energy into negative people. Hiring for attitude and valuing that above skill set, putting people in the right roles, and I'll show an example of where we, on one of our plants, one of our new facilities, we actually went in and did the demographics on the organization and selected people for roles based on characteristics that would align them and make them most successful in those roles. Now, I'll show you an example of that. Another one I didn't touch on here, but over-reliance on experts to the exclusion of the rest of the team can be demoralizing. We'll talk some more about that. And finally, that eliminate the distinction between crafts and really emphasizing that it's one team and one organization. So I think that's the overview of the talk that I'll be giving in mainstream. And I really like the fact that mainstream focuses on soft side and the management side of these organizations, because I think it's an area that's been greatly neglected and one that has a tremendous impact on success. So with that, Tom, I'll kind of open up to any questions that people might have. I think we have a few minutes.